All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for today's A Month of Service presentation. Of My name is Nia Murray. I am Programs Coordinator with Neighborhood Recovery Community Development Corporation, and we are one of the partners in the A Month of Service collaboration. Also included in the partnership is the City of Houston's Department of Neighborhoods, and joining us today is Ms. Myra Hippolyte. And on behalf of the Houston Bar Association, we have our presenters joining us today, Mr. Charles Foster with Foster Global, along with Ms. A.B. Hart, and Anush Shaw with the Law Office of Anush Shaw that's going to be giving our presentation today. But also included in the partnership is Lone Star Legal Aid, the Earl Carl Institute, Harris County Appraisal District, Harris County Tax Assessor Collector's Office, and Houston Volunteer Lawyers. And collectively, we make up A Month of Service. And basically what A Month of Service is a collaboration of these 8 different organizations that come together on a monthly basis of workshops relative to community empowerment, asset building, asset protection, and the maintaining of generational wealth. Our organizations have been collaborating probably for the last 5-6 years or so, if not more than that. And we started out going in person in individual communities throughout the city of Houston, hosting a month-long set of workshops in that particular neighborhood, and then moving and going to a different neighborhood and offering those same resources to other areas. And of course, with COVID, we've had to adjust and adapt and provide the information to you virtually. So in doing that, the collaboration itself, the workshops have expanded due to the feedback of the people that we all serve. They want more. And we know that there are even more communities and people that are out there that don't have access to information that's out there, don't know about different resources that are available to the community. And basically that's what we want to do today. We want to provide you with some information about the immigration system and understanding how it works. So we're going to give you a little bit of the background. The attorneys will give you some background information about the immigration system and updates and things that are going on right now. So if there are any participants that are joining us today that will need to hear this presentation in Spanish, we do have a breakout room that will be available for you to go in and hear Spanish if needed. So so please let us know about that. But for right now, and our presenters, and we will move right on into our presentations.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Myra Hippolyte, and I work with the City of Houston Department of Neighborhoods. We've created a new division, and it's called the Office of Neighborhood Engagement. It's all about giving back to the Houston community with specific programs, just like the Month of Service. On behalf of Mayor Sylvester Turner and Director Takasha Francis, as well as our new division manager, Mr. Paul Green, we want to welcome you to the Month of Service program. The Month of Service is all about giving back to the Houston community free information. We want to make sure that all of Houston, Harris County, the state of Texas community leaders are able to get the same information that everyone else gets. A lot of times, some information gets to certain people and not to others, specifically when we're going through a lot of stressors in our life. So we want to make sure, and by stressors, we mean we've gone through Winter Storm Uri, we've gone through hurricanes, we've gone through COVID, now we're going through monkeypox. When you're going through those different situations, we want to make sure that everyone has the proper information so that they can make the right decisions in their lives. Thanks, guys. Have a great day. I've been out on vacation. I think all of us, all the partners were out in July. So Nia and I are a little bit getting back to normal. So we're all excited to seeing you guys, sending a lot of hugs and kisses, and see y'all in a little while. Thanks.
A couple of things that I did forget to mention before we get to the other introductions. If you guys do have any questions, please feel free to type your questions into the chat. And if you're joining us on Facebook, please type them into the comment section and we will be reading them aloud at the end of the presentation. In addition to that, I also want to give the disclaimer that information that is presented here today is for educational purposes only. It is not legal advice. However, if you do find yourself in need of some type of civil legal service, then we do encourage you to reach out to our legal service partners to apply for their services that are at no charge or at low cost. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that this is for educational only. So with that being said, Mr. Foster, let us start with your introduction first, and then we'll go with AB and then Anuj, and then you can move right on into your presentation, Anuj, after that. So Mr. Foster, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Okay, so yes, I'm afraid if I do, it may take up the full 2 hours, but I'll try to.
At least.
I'm Charles Foster. I'm chairman. That means I head the immigration law firm of Foster LLP. It just happens to be the largest in the state of Texas. And one of the reasons is because we've been practicing a long time for going on for more than 4 decades. In fact, we'll celebrate our 50th year in March. So I'm a graduate of University of Texas undergrad and law school, and have been practicing immigration law for more than 50 years, sort of embarrassed to admit. And in addition to being involved in policy for 10 years, I was a professor of immigration law at the University of Houston Law Center. And I served as a policy advisor to 2 presidents of the United States. I was a senior policy advisor on immigration for President George W. Bush, and as well later for President Obama as well. Over the years, I've worked on in different capacities on what originally helped develop the bare bones of what became known as comprehensive immigration reform, and I've wound up working for not only 2 presidents on that, but for 3 or 4 would-be presidents, people that they thought and I thought would be presidents, but didn't turn out that way. So I could go on, but that's enough. And so I look forward to being on the program with y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Foster. AB?
Hi, my name is A.B. Hart. I was born in Peru, came to the United States when I was 10 years old, and sure enough, first thing I knew is the immigration process that we all had to go through. So that's where my passion became in immigration. As soon as I turned 18, I joined an immigration law firm and I fell in love. I knew I wanted to be an immigration attorney, and sure enough, I entered TSU for law school and graduated in 2018. And I've been doing asylum cases, and also now I'm practicing more in EB-5s and non-immigrant visas. So I'm very happy to be part of Foster and look forward to meet more of immigration attorneys and speaking to everybody who is right now in this presentation.
Okay, good deal. Thank you for joining us. Anuj?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's really great to be here. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this presentation. And I have to first and foremost say what an honor it is to present here next to Charles. You know, Charles is really our senior light on the hill for all of us immigration practitioners, probably not only in Houston, but in Texas and maybe even around the nation. It's just really great to be here. I graduated law school in May of 2002, so I just crossed 20 years of practicing law this summer, and 15 of those years have been in immigration. I started out practicing in sort of a large corporate environment doing oil and gas kind of work at really one of the big law firms here in town, and was fortunate to clerk with a federal judge and had a couple of other experiences. But once I fell into immigration about 15 years ago, which happened to be kind of by accident, that's a story I'll probably be able to tell in a different time. I fell in love with the area of practice, kind of like AB said. It's just wonderful. The bar is wonderful, meeting all our colleagues. We're all here to help one another. And I feel so good every night. I go to bed. There's stress. Don't get me wrong. There's stress and deadlines, but I feel really good when I go to bed every night, knowing that I've made a difference for people. And it's really gratifying. And I'm really happy to be here. I got board certified in immigration in 2014, I think. And so time flies, gosh, but it's just a wonderful area of law. And it's just a very profound and deep and intricate area of law as well. So I know we'll all be talking about that as well. So thank you for having me. And I'm looking forward to the presentation and to the program today.
Okay, so again, we have the experts that are here today to provide you guys with this information. By no means do Myra and I ever aspire to be the experts in any of these legal fields. So we want to make information directly from those people in those particular professions. To things changing, processes changing, things that we want to make sure that you guys have the most up-to-date information that you possibly can. For any other attorneys that are joining us, thanks to the Houston Bar Association, you can receive CLE credit for participation in the A Month of Service legal presentations. So if you see that course number on any of our workshops, then know that that is something that is available to you at no charge. So with that being said, that need to have this presentation in Spanish, please let us know. We do have a breakout room that is available that you can go into. So if you would just either type it into the chat or raise your hand, so that way we'll know if we need to go ahead and open up that breakout room. Otherwise, we can, I guess, probably kind of all stay here in this one area and have you guys just do the presentation from there. But if you do need to, just know that that is an available option to you. So Anush, would you like to go ahead and begin?
I'd be glad to. Thank you so much. As I begin, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge a couple of things. I like to say this when I do public speaking, that first of all, we're a nation of immigrants. And as obvious as that may sound to a lot of the people on this call, people don't think about that, because it's a very politicized and highly charged area. And I asked people, well, think back to who your ancestors were and where they came from. I realized that what makes the news are people kind of, as Charles will talk about, at the border and that kind of thing. But if it wasn't your parents, it was their parents. If it wasn't their parents, it was their parents. But someone came from somewhere, unless you were a Native American, indigenous to this country, many, many centuries ago. And a lot of people, it's not that they're surprised, or maybe they are, but they kind of have to say, oh, what an interesting point, And so I do like to make that point that, over the centuries of the founding of this country, after whatever it was, the 15th, 16th century kind of thing, we've developed a series of a bunch of immigration laws and immigration legal system, and that's what we'll talk a little bit about today. The other thing I like to acknowledge is immigration law is profoundly complex. This is by far the most complex area of law I've ever practiced in. The Supreme Court of the United States has acknowledged as much, as have some federal circuit courts of appeal. They often say it's the most complex area of law next to tax law. I know nothing about tax law, but what I do know is it's like 10 trillion pages of tax code that I could never probably interpret to save my life. But I say that because I know that a lot of people think that, well, it's just about people jumping the border. Oh, it's just about, filling out these forms and whatever. And that could be the furthest thing from the truth. One other thing I'll say about this as I begin my presentation is there's an encyclopedia, for lack of a better word, that we all refer to. It's called Kurzban's. It's overseen by a gentleman by the name of Ira Kurzban. He's an attorney in Florida. And it used to be about 2,500 pages, about this thick. As of this year, it has gotten so thick now it's 2 volumes about this thick. And that's just an encyclopedia without all the details. So lest anyone think this is an easy topic for any of us to discuss, let me assure you that we all spend lots of time, hours and hours a day, dozens of hours a week, just really trying to wrap our minds around these issues so that we can really make the most of helping our clients who all want to live essentially the American dream, right? So that's what I like to tell people is I try to help people live the American dream. Of course, you see my hair, it's become mostly silver now, probably from trying to figure out how immigration law works all these decades, but at least I have my hair, so I'm happy. Let me just give you a general overview about the immigration system. Again, this is something we could talk for many, many hours or weeks or months on, provide courses, but let me try to give a general idea so people have sort of a roadmap of how this works. There are two general ways that people can come to the United States. There are non-immigrant categories in which they can come, and there are immigrant categories. Let me start with the immigrant categories. So immigrant category means people can come here and they can remain here legally and remain a resident for the rest of their lives. If they can work here legally and live here in the United States legally for the rest of their lives. And so you might have heard of something called a green card. That's the same thing as a legal permanent residence. And a lot of people aim for that. I think that's probably most people's goal, and then ultimately to get their citizenship. What people don't understand is there are very few avenues really in our immigration system through which people can obtain legal permanent residence. It's really interesting. You would think there'd be a lot of different options and ways for people to do it, but there aren't. In no particular order, I'll start, for example, with possibly the hardest one, which is investment. If you happen to be someone of means and you happen to have an extra $1 million or so lying around, nowadays it's $1 million and $1 million and 50,000 added to that as of these last few months. You can apply for something called what AB mentioned a few moments ago. She works in an EB-5, which is an investment visa that can give you legal permanent residence. Not too many people around the world have that kind of money lying around, and there are enough who do, so that people like AB and Charles and their firms and certain firms can really have a large practice with this. But that's one option people have. And so they do whole conferences just on EB-5. So I'll just stop there. Another type of investment people can do, and that's more the non-immigrant, but I'll just say it since I said investment, is what's called an E1 or E2 treaty trader or treaty investor visa. And I'll talk about that when I talk about the non-immigrant category. Another way people can immigrate to the United States so that they can remain here permanently is through family. And I know Charles kind of mentioned that, alluded to that briefly a few moments ago as well. And it's a lot harder than people think. I think a lot of people think that once they get into the United States, if they marry a US citizen or possibly a permanent resident, or if they somehow give birth to or father a child here, they're set and ready to go. And it's a lot more complicated than that. And the definition of what constitutes a family member who could sponsor you in the immigration system is very limited. So you can't sponsor a niece or a nephew or a cousin or a grandparent or a brother-in-law or what have you. It's very limited. You can really only sponsor spouses, children who are sons and daughters under 21. You can sponsor adult sons and daughters in certain cases if you've got that, and you've got that you can sponsor brothers and sisters. But as people in this practice know, sometimes that can be many, many decades before people can even come to the United States because of the wait times. So, immigration through family is something that's possible, but it's really out of reach, believe it or not, for most people, because they just don't happen to have a family member here who's a qualifying family member for them to get sponsored. Another way people can come to the United States, again, through immigrate permanently for permanent residence, is through employment. A lot of the employment goes into the non-immigrant category, which I'll talk about in a few brief moments, but there's something called a labor certification. So if you have a company or corporation that wants to hire you, they can file a petition for you, and they have to be involved with the Department of Labor, and they file a labor certification for you. And hopefully if you go through all those processes and everything goes well, you can end up getting a green card that way. It's pretty difficult though. They have to show the Department of Labor that they really can't find anyone else in this region of the country who can do that job. Now, there's very creative ways of doing these labor certifications, and I know that Charles and AB at their firm do a lot of these. We do some, but not nearly as many as they do. But that's a way that people can immigrate. And then there's some non-immigrant job categories like the H-1B. I know Charles mentioned that. There's something called an L, that kind of thing, that can lead to permanent residence through certain avenues, but those start out as non-immigrant categories. And then the other final way I would say that people can immigrate is through a large category of, visas or, just methodologies called that all fall under the humanitarian category. So you have asylum. That's probably the one people hear about the most. People file for political asylum. They're afraid they're going to be harmed in their home country. So they come to the border in a lot of cases, not every case, but a lot of cases they do come to the border and say, look, I can't go back to my home country. I'm going to be tortured. I'm going to be harmed, persecuted, whatever it is. And so that's one category under humanitarian, but there's interesting ones too. People are hearing more and more, but there's something called a U visa. If you're here in the United States and you've been a victim of certain types of qualifying crimes, not just any crime, there's a list, But if you fall under one of those 18 or 20 crimes of being a victim of one of those crimes, you can apply for a U visa, which could lead to permanent residence. There's a T visa, T for trafficking. So if you're a victim of trafficking, that's something that could lead to permanent residence. I mean, certainly don't want to be a victim of anything like that. Those things are horrible, but there are opportunities for people to do that. An example is, you might have heard about that terrible situation a few weeks ago in San Antonio, where there was a giant tractor trailer or whatever it was, with 50 odd people in it who died. A lot of the people who did survive, some survived, are possibly going to be able to apply for either a U or T visa so that they could stay in the United States. They can assist law enforcement agencies in their investigations. And, it's sort of a humanitarian option. There are a couple of other things we call sort of special rule as a fifth category that very few people qualify for. There's something called the Cuban Adjustment Act. So if you're a Cuban national, you come to the United States and you enter somehow lawfully, which gets to be a very complex issue in itself, what that means. But I'll just say, if you've entered somehow lawfully, you can apply within a year for your green card. There's something called registry, which is the last thing I'll say under the immigrant category, which is very interesting. It was something like, if you'd gotten to the United States prior to January of 1972, I believe, then there's a way for you to apply for your permanent residence. And actually just recently, I think they're proposing something where they're going to extend that to something more current. So that's 50 years ago. So that's interesting if they update that. So that's kind of a general overview. So there, as you can see, not that many ways people can come and permanently be here in the United States. You've got investment, which is out of reach for the vast majority of humanity. You've got family, which is limited. You've got some employment opportunities, which can be really restrictive. And then you've got the humanitarian categories. And in a way, while those are the ones that really get all the news, I would guess, objectively speaking, you probably don't want to be in that situation where you think you'll be, either persecuted back in your home country, your life is in danger, or you were trafficked or harmed, or, who knows what. The non-immigrant categories are categories through which people can come to the US, but they're only supposed to be here temporarily. So when you apply for those visas overseas at consular posts, US embassy or US consulate, you're making a representation to that consular officer that you really only want to go to the US temporarily. You have no immigrant intent. Of course, that's not what happens in reality. I'm sure half the people, probably all want to live, most of the people kind of want to look at, we think of the American dream, but at least on paper, that they tell the people at the consular post, we just want to go there as a student. So you can come as a student, like an F1, but of course now student, that's interesting. That also can lead to some employment, which could lead to permanent residence, right? But at least at the beginning, at the inception of that process, you're telling the consular officer, I just want to be a student temporarily, and then I'll return to my home country. You can be a visitor for business, a visitor for pleasure. You could be, as Charles was saying, an H-1B worker. That's somebody who can come if you're in an area of specialized knowledge. So you do have to have either a bachelor's degree or something equivalent. There's an educational equivalent, the way they calculate that. And it's usually for a little bit higher skilled people. So it wouldn't be really more labor type work or something like that. It would be more something like, something that would require a bachelor's or that level of education, accounting, software engineers, web designers, could be lawyers. It could, it's things like that. You've got computer IT people. A lot of people like that fall into that category. And so we have 85,000 people who can come each year on the H-1B 65, and then there's another 20,000 for people who have a master's or above from a US university. There's other categories, like I said earlier, there's something called the L visa, which is an intra-company transferee. So imagine you've got a giant company like Exxon, and they have an office all over the world. The offices all over the world. They have an office in London. They want to move a high-level manager or executive to the Houston office. They can come through that kind of visa. That visa also, in most cases, can lead to permanent residence, depending on how that person comes and if the company sponsors. The thing about permanent residence with employment, in the vast majority of cases, you have to have a company sponsor you. There are some exceptions. But most of the time you do have to have a company sponsor you. So a lot of people come on an H-1B or an L, but if the company is unwilling to sponsor you, then you're just going to be here temporarily during the pendency of your visa, and then you can extend it a certain period of time, and then you need to leave. So, people come on cultural exchanges, they come as diplomats, so there are a lot of different ways people come here as temporary visitors to the United States, but at a certain point they need to leave. So those are kind of the major types of categories that we deal with. There's, I think, earlier Charles mentioned something called the O visa. O is sort of someone of extraordinary ability. It could be an artist, could be an athlete, I think, things like that. So, I actually represented somebody, well, I should have said this on the immigrant side. If you're someone of an extraordinary ability, I represented somebody who was an Olympic champion once, and we got his green card because he had won a gold medal at the Olympics in the 80s. And so if you're someone that extraordinary, if you're Roger Federer, I'm a big tennis fan. I don't know if you know who that is, but if you're Roger Federer, you probably don't have any trouble getting a green card in the United States through a lot of ways. He has $1 million lying around, so he could do that. He could also, do the EB-5 investment. He could also do an EB-1, what's called an EB-1, employment-based first category A, extraordinary ability. So there are those types of categories. So sorry if I'm going back, I don't want to be confusing, but there's so many things that one can do. And at the same time, there are a lot of things outside of that people can't do. But I hope that provides just a general overview and idea of the kind of things that we all work on every day and the ways that we try to help people. And also gives you an idea that while those things are available, there's a lot of average everyday people just don't have any avenue or entryway into either immigrating here or even maybe coming here as non-immigrants, because you have to convince a consular officer that you don't have the intent to remain in the United States. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to answer questions later. And if there's something I missed, certainly I would love for AB and Charles to either correct me or add to what I said.
Well, okay, I think it's my turn, and I want to compliment Anuj, and he said something nice about me, and it's a pleasure to be on the program with him and AB as well. And so I'm going to pick up on what he said and deal with some other aspects of that. As Anuj indicated, the basic thought is, while we are a nation of immigrants and we were wide open, with the passage of time, almost each year, we have become more and more restrictive. So today, while we're a nation of immigrants, we also have a very restrictive legal immigration system. And so there are many good, wonderful individuals that technically may not be able to qualify under any of the limited immigration options that Anuj indicated. It's furthermore complicated if you're already in the United States. If you're in the United States, and by definition, I guess you are, and if you're listening and watching this for your own benefit, you're here. In many ways, you have to maintain your status before you seek another status. So if you did come as a visitor to the United States, and that status expired, or if you came in as a student and that status expired, or if you entered across our southern border without inspection, and you're just here in the United States, yes, you have all of those options that Anuj outlined technically available to you, but they may not really be, because there's another set of laws that are very punitive that say that if you're out of status, number one, you're not eligible to change your status within the US, with a few exceptions. One of those exceptions, if you look at all the options that are available to you, it's often said that overwhelmingly our legal immigration system is, the premise of that is family reunification. Because there are more numbers and more people qualified through family, through close immediate relative than any other way. I think approximately 70%. So there are, as Anuj mentioned, there are several different family relations, but the critical ones are if you're an immediate relative of a US citizen, you have a spouse or a parent or an adult child. Now, the reason I'm mentioning that is not only is that a viable way for you to immigrate, but is one of the exceptions that if you're in the United States and if your status has expired, and if you made a lawful entry, even though your status expired, you came in, for example, as a visitor years ago, you may still be able to obtain adjust your status and become a lawful permanent resident in the United States based upon that bona fide relationship. Sometimes that's because someone has come here and they've been here for years and they had a child or children born, and those children grow up, and at the age of 21, the child born in the US by definition, under our Constitution, 14th Amendment, is a citizen of the United States. And a child may petition as an adult for their parents, and that means they've got to be 21. Furthermore, sometimes people living in the US long enough, they may meet someone and they get married, and that person happens to be a US citizen. Then you also have an immediate relative that can petition for you. And the reason I'm singling that out is those are two examples where even if you have not maintained your status in the US, you can still file an application to adjust and become a legal resident. Now that's very critical, because if you look at all the options available to someone through family, employment, investment, those petitions could be filed. And if you have not maintained your status, you would normally apply for your immigrant visa at the American consulate, the appropriate American consulate with jurisdiction in your home country. If you're from Mexico, that would, all immigrant visa cases are scheduled at the American consulate, for example, in Juarez, Mexico, right across from El Paso. If you're from India, there are several or more consulates in India, American consulates that would have jurisdiction. So you would go back to apply for your immigrant visa, but that can be very risky if you have not maintained your status, because there's another law that says if you have failed to if you have been in the US in unauthorized status, you overstayed for more than 6 months, then you're prohibited from returning to the United States for a 3-year period. If you've overstayed for 1 full year, you can be required to, you're subject to a 10-year prohibition from returning to the US. So sometimes we find people who have, they've been told about the first part of the legal option, that they can qualify through a family member, and they're very excited. Someone has filed a petition and they go to their final interview, let's say in Juarez or in New Delhi or wherever, and only then they discover that there's another law that prohibits their reentry for a 10-year period. So those are issues that you have to think about. But basically, if you have let your status expire, then that's you should know that that could make your legal options either at best very difficult to impossible. For example, someone that's here in unauthorized status, and by the way, I think it's a truism to say that just everyone in the United States in unauthorized status is fully employed, because otherwise they wouldn't be here. Because unlike what you hear politicians say, you're not entitled to any public benefits of any sort. So if you, even though you're fully employed and your employer, let's say, is empathetic and is willing to sponsor you, that may not happen, because if you obtain that approval of the Department of Labor and an employer's petition, and you went back to your home country to apply, you would be subject to a 10-year bar. So you have to, again, you have to think about that. Same thing true through investment. If you made $1 million or $100 million investment, if you fail to maintain your status, you may be ineligible to immigrate. So what do you do? First of all, you seek the counsel that was suggested, pro bono counsel, or if you can afford it, experienced legal counsel. Anuj said, and I think that's a good way to judge someone, is that person board certified in immigration and nationality law, for example. And you have someone look at all of those issues, because in my experience, it's far better if someone has made their lives here in the United States, and and they're going about their lives, even though they want to get their residency. They don't want to jeopardize your current situation unless you know that by starting the process and going through the process and going to your final interview, particularly if it's outside of the country, that you're going to be successful. Because I've seen tragic situations where that's happened, and the breadwinner has gone abroad thinking they're going to come back, only to be stuck there with no viable way to return to the United States. So number one thing you want to do is just to make sure you vet these questions, have someone review these issues to make sure you have a viable option. One thing that I like to say, I suggest it, and we as attorneys do that. We point out that if you have a valid marriage to a U.S. citizen, that can be a perfect way to legally immigrate. But years ago, I learned the hard way. When I said that, I had a client show up, and he ran out and married the first person he saw. He had misunderstood what I had meant by that. So if you've entered into what would be viewed as a bona fide marriage, a marriage entered into for normal marital purposes, why your parents, why people get married, it's a real marriage, one you believe will last forever for normal purposes, and then that's fine. But nothing I say or anyone else would say should encourage you to marry someone simply for an immigration benefit. Even you may think, and you may hear someone to tell you that that's successful, but I know through my experience that I know, because I've seen so many situations where people not only did that, not only was it not successful, but they were once the Immigration Service determined that it was not a legitimate marriage. And by the way, at that interview, that will be the immigrant's first interview, but you're being interviewed by an officer who does this 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times a day, and they're pretty good at detecting signs that tell them that this may not be a bona fide marital relations. They can ask a series of questions. They can separate you, put you in different rooms, tell you that the other person has confessed. So even though you may know someone that's done that, gotten away with it, it's too risky, because at the end, the Immigration Service doesn't say, nice try, try again. The law says just the opposite. Once they make a finding under Section 204C, you're permanently barred from immigrating on any other basis, even if you make that $1 million investment, even if your employer sponsors you, even if you enter into another real marriage, you would be barred. So don't be tempted. Since we have a little time, I'd like to say, if you'll indulge me, because for some reason I like this. I frequently say something to clients about this. I say there's something worse than an immigration problem. That's a marriage problem, because you got to live with your marriage every day, and you may, as you know, here in Harris County, live and never ever encounter an immigration officer. But if you're in a bad marriage, that's something you'll encounter daily. And so I often joke when I say that, because I say someone paid $25 million to have me say that, and they made a movie of that. Well, that's not entirely true, but they did make a movie where my character or actor playing it did say that. It turned out they made a movie about one of my clients who went on to a very extraordinary case, and an immigration was part of his story, and so that little vignette was in the movie. If you want to see it, it's on Amazon Prime. It's called Mao's Last Dance. So I'd like to go back to something else that News says about temporary visas. So if you're here on a temporary visa, the key, and if you want to stay, and so many, for good reason, we're a land of immigrants, people do. The critical thing is always maintain your temporary status. If you come as a visitor, you can be admitted for a maximum of 6 months. File for that extension. When you file for that extension, you may not get a decision within 6 months. You would still have to file for a new extension depending upon your situation, even before you got a decision on your first application. If you're a student, maintain your student status. Don't fall beneath the required number of hours that are required. Student status is great for a variety of reasons. When you graduate, you're eligible to obtain 1 year of practical training, optional practical training, which is a wonderful thing because it's a way to get work authorization and to get a job without your employer's sponsorship. And that way they can determine whether they like you, whether they're going to sponsor you for one of the other non-immigrant or even immigrant visa classifications. If you graduate in a STEM field, science, technology, engineering, or math, you can get 3 years of optional practical training. And sometimes you've got to maintain your status. I often joke, I've got clients that because of immigration, they wound up with 2 PhD degrees because they were desperate to maintain their status. So they would graduate, then they'd get a master's, and then another master's, and then a PhD, another PhD, all the while maintaining their status, while holding out hope that they could qualify through permanent residency through employment or family. By the way, if family really makes up 70% of legal immigration, the other basically 30% is employment based. Those who qualify through investment and through asylum is a relatively very small percentage. And employment, as Anush pointed out, is primarily, not exclusively, where the employer can prove the unavailability of qualified U.S. workers. And I would just say this is a good time to start a case like that because, why? Because we're at record low unemployment. So basically today is probably no oversimplification, but everyone that wants a job has a job. So it's easier in conditions like we have today to prove the unavailability of any U.S. worker than it would be than if we had a high unemployment rate where everyone was desperate looking for a job. Let's get back to your options if you're in the United States. Short of immediate close family relationship, then employment, if you maintain your status, employment will probably be the way you go. Find a happy employer, an enthusiastic employer. I say enthusiastic because it's a lengthy process and you have to have an employer willing to stick with you through that process. I'm not going to talk about investment because that's so few people, but if there's a question, let me just end on talking about one more thing that may be of interest, and that is, I'm going to put this, I've said this to so many people, your real hope is frankly comprehensive immigration reform. Something that I was the senior policy advisor of George W. Bush when that was first worked on. And that was more than 20 years ago. And I say that's the best hope because for many people that are out of status or do not have any available options, changing our immigration laws to reflect the realities, the fact that I think the last time I heard, we had something about 10 million job vacancies where we're short of people apply. We need more workers. We have a large undocumented population, 11 million. They're not going anywhere. There's not a serious politician in the country actually seriously believes that we should remove them. That would be a disaster for the American economy. We have all these young men from Mexico wanting to come across the border, and they would come across legally if they could, and we need their services. In fact, if they're successful, If they're successful, they're fully employed. So we have a temporary workers program today. It's called illegal immigration. It means if you can walk 100 miles, survive being smuggled in the back of a truck or being robbed by the cartels, and you can survive you being, the average person is apprehended twice before they make it in, and you finally make it into the US. Welcome to America. You can be fully employed because that's what the 11 million are. They're undocumented. No one really cares. They can work as they're working as so-called contract workers. But we really need to reform the whole system. But today, because of politics, we're probably further away from that than we were on the morning of 9/11/2021, where I was working for the president. And the president, and we were all very optimistic we were going to pass a big immigration bill. And since then, we've never been any closer. And by matter of fact, we've gotten further away. The one thing that may be possible is that President Obama, and again, I work for him, when he, out of complete frustration, when the House, and I was involved with this, some of the negotiation with Speaker John Boehner, when they sort of blew up the chance of passing the Senate version of comprehensive immigration reform. Out of frustration, he did something very, took a small step, and by executive action, made a executive proclamation called Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA, protecting, he did that in 2016, protecting individuals who have been brought here as children. And that's been renewed periodically. I won't go through all the legislation, even though our Attorney General has tried to block it. DACA is still on the books. It's very widely supported, but we need to put that in a legislative format. And there is some possibility of a small window that Congress will at least enact a legislative form of DACA, referred to as the DREAM Act, which is critical because, again, the Texas Attorney General is trying to block that, and that case will ultimately go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court could possibly rule that President Obama's authority exceeded his legal authority when he originally made that executive, I took that executive action. So legislative action is critical, and I would say it is, if I was a betting man, I think we have about a 30 or 40% chance of that happening this year. Our own Senator John Cornyn is very supportive of that. He's been in discussion with Senator Durbin of the state of Illinois, but that's only, in my opinion, the only real hope in the immediate future. And even that, I give less than a 50% chance. But for many people that may be listening to this, the real solution would be legislation. The problem is we don't know when, even though rationally that should happen, we do not know when that will happen. But stay tuned. Be aware that it takes two acts, one from the Senate and one from the House and the President of the United States. I've worked with the Hispanic community, and there are, unfortunately, people in the Hispanic community will take advantage. There will be pieces of legislation passed by one house, and they will call that amnesty, and they will charge you a fee to sign you up. And it doesn't count unless it's passed by both the House of Representatives, the Senate, and signed by the President. And I'll just tell you right now, that is highly unlikely to happen anytime soon. I'm going to end on one note, and that is what's going on in the border, because that impacts everything we've talked about, because there's a significant percentage of the politicians will say, well, we can't, Charles, that's great. Yeah, we like DACA, we like all that, but we can't do anything until we quote control the border. And the border is out of control. The border is wide open. People are coming in, they're getting all these benefits. The Democrats are registering them to vote. The president's not he's abandoned Section 42, the Remain in Mexico, the most sufficient policies for affecting that. He's failing to build a wall to keep out drugs, to keep out all of these caravans. And they're saying because of all that, we can't do anything on the legal side, which is really sad because one doesn't really have a lot to do with the other. It's doubly sad because none of what I just told you happens to be even remotely true. I would say it's not very good. It's very, I won't say bad policy. I'll just say it's just not true. But it may be, unfortunately, very good politics because build a wall is a catchy slogan. The border's wide open is a catchy slogan. By the way, building a wall, it was said to keep out the drugs and to prevent those large caravans coming out of Central Americans. Well, they weren't Central Americans, they were really just from three countries, from Nicaragua, from El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. So the problem with that is it doesn't make any sense. The drugs are flowing across the border, and according to the statistics of U.S. Customs and Border Protection and common sense, they're being brought in the back of tractor trailers coming through the ports of entries. Every day through our ports of entry, something like 35,000 trucks are crossing into the United States from Mexico. 20,000 are coming up from Laredo. And among those trucks, drugs are being brought into the U.S. Why? Because they're being brought in by the ton. It's a $20 to $40 billion a year industry for Mexico. They're not putting drugs on the back of Mr. Juan Diego swimming across the border. Studies show if you go into any restaurant where there's an undocumented worker across the border and you do a study and you ask him how he got in, he will tell you he was on average was successful on the third time, meaning he was caught on average twice and expelled. Well, that's a terrible business model. If the average person's caught 2 times before they get in, are you going to put on someone's back $500,000 worth of heroin? So I don't know whether anyone could carry that amount, but I'm just throwing that out. No, it would be a terrible business model. So a wall doesn't stop any drugs because they're coming in through ports of entry. The caravans, people are coming up, surrendering themselves at ports of entry and between ports of entry. They're not trying to evade detection because they're coming up thinking they can apply, thinking that they can qualify for asylum. These people, vast majority are from 3 of the Central American countries, also increasingly more from Venezuela, Cuba, Haiti, are fleeing extreme violence, poverty, and doing what any rational person would do. They're trying to come for a better life, but bring their children, give them a better life. And they're being led to believe that they can qualify for asylum. Who leads them to believe that? Unfortunately, the very same cartels that are smuggling drugs are also smuggling human beings because it's become a very lucrative business. They charge someone from Mexico anywhere from $4,000 to $6,000, someone from Central America, $6,000 to $8,000 per person. They don't have the money. They have relatives that they hold the immigrant hostage until their relative in the U.S. pays it off. So they're telling them that this is a good time to come, but they're overwhelmingly coming by push factors because of the poverty, the violence, and because they're coming, because everyone, same reason, they're coming to this great land of America for job opportunities. In fact, as our economy goes up, more people come. If the economy goes down, fewer people come. So that's the big magnet that attracts people. But I've warned some of my Republican friends, be careful. If you're going around telling people the border is wide open and you're going to get public benefits, you may be deemed to be aiding and abetting the illegal entry. Look at Section 1324A of Title 8, which makes that a 10-year felony. But they'll probably continue to say that because unfortunately it's good politics. So what to do on the southern border? I'll answer that question, then I'll stop and let others speak, or we'll take your question. The wall makes sense in limited areas, but what to do on the southern border, to me, is clear. Long term, we should focus. We should have a North American Marshall Plan. Well, we rebuilt Europe after the end of World War II. We cannot do that. We can't say we're going to have an African or Asian Marshall Plan, but we can certainly focus on the economic conditions in those countries, Mexico and those sending countries of Central America, that are close enough that people can literally walk into America. It's true, there'll always be smatterings of other people, but overwhelmingly, they're coming from those countries. We did that for Mexico with NAFTA. When we did NAFTA, jobs grew in Mexico. Illegal immigration fell off the chart. It went down very low from Mexico, and then it started coming from Central America. So long term, that's a long term. It's going to be difficult. But I think it'd be a wise investment that we invest our dollars that we spend in foreign aid, focus on those countries, focus on working with their military and their police because they're corrupt, so that they can create a semblance of safety in those countries as well. Short term, I think the best thing that we can do that be most effective, and interestingly, one of our own congressmen, Dan Crenshaw and Senator John Cornyn have introduced legislation on this. We should significantly increase the number of asylum officers, immigration judges, trial attorneys, so that we can adjudicate those asylum claims relatively quickly. Because right now, when someone applies for asylum, we're torn. What the Trump administration wanted to do is just say, we're going to ignore our asylum laws. We'll just push you back in Mexico, not let you do it. Even though I think Title 42 was misapplied, we're going to use a health provision to send you back. Or remain in Mexico. We're going to keep, the Trump administration really meant that, remain in Mexico forever. The agreement was never that. We're going to let you remain in Mexico temporarily and bring you in an hourly basis to apply for asylum, but they forgot that second part. So there's only 3 ways to deal with that. We can just ignore our immigration laws that allow someone to apply for asylum and push you out of the country. Or we could say, okay, we're going to allow you to apply for asylum, but it's going to take forever to adjudicate your case. So we can either incarcerate you, or we can release you and trust that you'll come back for your hearing. Surprisingly, most do. Or we could do something else. And this is what I've advocated, by increasing significant funding for asylum officers, immigration judges. We can have those hearings. We can honor our system, have quick hearings. That sends a message back to Central America. Don't come, because your cases are going to be turned around. You're not going to be able to wait in the U.S. for 3 or 4 years and get employment authorization for your asylum hearing. It's going to take 2 weeks. So I could go on about that, but instead I think I will stop. And Anush, feel free to add or expand. And then we can also take AB, you're here. I don't think you've gone off to a separate thing. You can add anything, or we can take the questions.
Yeah, I would like to add on one point that you made about violations. Many immigrants here are like, hey, I got a DWI, or hey, I've been here unlawfully in the United States for 2 years. Am I going to be able to fix my papers? I'm married to a United States citizen. Is that a possibility? My bar. So there are waivers that the government allows you. Of course, you have to meet the standards and be able to present to the government and say, despite my criminal background, despite my unlawful presence, or if you have not a marriage fraud, but other type of frauds, the government may allow you to file a waiver and proceed with your green card process. And there's also a non-immigrant waiver for people who are trying to get into the United States through employment base or any other non-immigrant. There is a waiver for that, but like I said, you have to meet certain requirements and standards. So if you have any violation, you have to seek a legal expert to determine whether you're eligible for that waiver and proceed with the process. So I just wanted to make an end note on that.
Bruce?
No, I mean, I think everyone's raising great points. And as I started by saying, immigration is so complicated, we've just hardly touched the dust off the dirt here. I mean, we could talk for hours and days and weeks and months about each of these topics. People have written very large books about all these topics, waivers, each topic that Charles mentioned, and, all the different non-immigrant and immigrant categories that I even touched upon. I did promise that I was going to talk about the E1 and E2 in the non-immigrant section when I spoke, and I realized I didn't, just so I can put it out there for people saying, wait, he didn't say anything about that. If you don't have $1 million and change, or in some cases $800,000, there's certain exceptions, to throw at an investment visa to get a green card, the EB-5, you can come to the United States. It doesn't really provide you a pathway to a green card, but you can come to the United States under the E1 or E2 categories. Those are treaties that we have. The United States has entered into a treaty with a number of countries. It's probably less than half of the countries in the world. Is it around 80 countries? I don't know if y'all know, but anyway, interestingly enough, for example, I'm originally from India. We have a lot of, my parents immigrated here from India. We have a lot of Indian national clients, and Bangladesh and Pakistan have both entered the treaty with the United States, but India hasn't. So it's kind of interesting. A lot of our Indian clients get upset, say, well, we have money to invest in a business, but we can't do it. It's like, well, don't tell me, tell your government. But the idea is, if you want to open a small business, you don't have $800,000, you don't have a little over $1 million to invest, but you might have a couple $100,000 to invest. You can open a sandwich shop, or we've represented people who open little restaurants, cafes. Somebody contacted us to do a laundromat. Somebody wanted to do a nail salon. We're representing somebody right now who's going to open an accounting firm. There are different types of businesses that people can come here and start. You don't have to have that really high number, but you can at least remain in the United States lawfully, you and your spouse and your children under 21, under the Immigration Act. That's what a child is, under 21. And you can all be here lawfully. You can work, the kids can go to school, and you have to renew that every few years. But it's a way for you to come here, direct and develop a business, and have an opportunity to kind of live the American dream for all intents and purposes. But it doesn't allow you a pathway to a green card. That's something that you should know. But not everybody has that $800,000 or $1 million. There are people who go from the E2, for example, the treaty investor visa, to an EB-5. They do so well in their businesses that after a few years, it's like, hey, we have the capital now to invest in an EB-5. So as Charles was saying, you can change your status, or that would be a way to adjust your status, is a technical term of art. But in any case, there are ways that once you're inside the United States, you have a lot of options for what you can do. But anyway, I just wanted to say that in addition. But no, thank you very much. And if anything else, if anyone else has anything to add, we could do that. And we can also answer some questions. I know we talked about a lot of different topics.
Let me ask a question just to reiterate. You called it the treaty investor visa, is that correct?
Correct. There's an E1, which is the treaty trader. So if you're doing international trade with another country, and there's an E2, which is a treaty investor. So somebody can come from a treaty country, pick a country, Pakistan, whatever, Canada, and you open a business here. And so whatever you want to do, I just consulted with some Canadians, in fact, who want to open some kind of animal related business. So they don't know if they want to do animal grooming or animal training, but they really love animals, non-human animals. And so, whatever the business is, there's no real restriction on that. And there's no, even under the statute, there's no minimum amount either. It just says it has to be a substantial amount. So, it can't be $10. You can't open a coffee, what do you call it? A taco stand or a lemonade stand. It does have to be something that's not just for your own subsistence. You want to direct and develop a business that can contribute to the economy. And the idea is that you'll have a business plan and you can show the government that you're going to be expanding, you're going to be starting to increase, contribute to the economy, you'll hire people, and and it's just that's the idea. A lot of these are just economic plans, right? They want to expand the economy.
Where would you get the list of the 80 treaty countries?
Don't take 80 literally. I just said that out loud. I mean, it could
Okay.
be 75, it could be, I don't know. But if you just Google it, just E2 treaty investor countries, there's a list.
Okay.
We have a lot more E2s than E1s. That's why I'm spending more time talking about the E2. Not too many people we have want to do trade, because then you still have to be doing stuff back and forth with your home country. At least with E2, they just come here, they open their business. I'm not saying it's easy, but then they don't have to continue to be tied to their home country that way.
That is a good form, or I know in a lot of our countries, I'm from Puerto Rico, and we're American, citizens already. But, a lot of our countries, like in Mexico, we're saying, well, you don't have to invest a lot, but, 10, 20, 30, 50, 100, $200 might be a lot for, some of the community leaders in those countries. So I'm going to try to get as much information as I can on that, because I think that's fantastic. Thank you.
Sure.
There are a couple of questions that I received, but I just want to remind for the folks that are attending here today, if you do have questions, please feel free to type them into the chat or raise your hand and unmute yourself so that you can ask your questions directly. But here are a couple of questions that I received. We are starting out the I-130 form and the process of bringing over a sibling who is 34 years old. What, if any, should we keep in mind as we begin this journey?
Anuj, go ahead, that's in your area.
Sure. Nia, say it again. They filed an I-130 and I heard 34 years old, but it cut out. I'm sorry.
They says we're starting out the I-130 form and the process of bringing over a sibling who's 34 years old. What, if any, should we keep in mind as we begin this process?
Sure. Well, one thing to keep in mind is there are 4 countries that are on the, I don't know what you want to call it, the list where they have huge backlogs: India, Mexico, the Philippines, and China. So if you're filing an I-130, which is a petition for alien relative for a sibling, and Charles mentioned very rightly, that that's not considered an immediate relative for immigration purposes. That's an immediate relative in everyday English parlance. Your brother, your sister, yeah, he or she's an American, is an immediate relative, but for immigration purposes, they're not. So they fall into a category called F4, family-based 4. And in that category, if you're from any other country in the world, the numbers are a little bit faster, not much, but certainly, like, as of recently, the Philippines, you have to wait over 20 years, that kind of thing. So I don't know what country they're talking about, but there's something called the Visa Bulletin. If you want to maybe Google that, you can see it. It's released about the middle portion of the month every month. And you can go, Honduras is the country, I see that. Okay, I don't have it memorized, but so Honduras isn't one of the 4 countries, but you're probably looking at a good 13 years, I think, anyway, if I'm not mistaken about that, in that range, with all the processing. So almost maybe a decade and a half by the time you do all the processing, this, that, and the other. And then there's consular interviews. And of course, what's going to happen in 13 years, we don't know. Right now, consular interviews are really backlogged around the world because of COVID, and they're just have never really caught up. Yeah, oof, oh wow is right. Yeah, this is not something that's going to happen overnight. Charles might know this better, but I've heard people joke about, for example, with Mexico, you can file for a sibling. That category just doesn't move. So technically it could say it's 18 years or whatever, but I think someone mentioned, and they were kind of joking, but they kind of weren't. I was at a conference, that if you really do the math, it's more like 150 years. I don't, Charles, have you heard something like that?
Yeah, exactly. Because as you say, the dates are misleading because it doesn't tell you. It doesn't mean it's going to move up month per month. Yeah, I would say that you as you said, a minimum, no matter where they're from, it's 14 to 15 years, and from certain countries, it's just off the charts. So even though you can qualify your sibling, it takes so long, you might want to look at, see if there's an employer-based option, which would be faster, or an investment option.
Wow. Okay. Another question here It says, to get my boyfriend his green card, boyfriend comes here on a tourist visa or I go there. Do we get married here or over there?
You want to take that, Anush?
Sure, happy to. Well, first of all, yeah, if you want to get married, I mean, there are a couple ways you could do it. You could do, you know, there's that, I don't really watch any TV, but apparently there was a show called 90 Day Fiance or something like that. Anyway, so if you don't want to get married, but you want to be engaged, you can file for your boyfriend under the K1 category, which is a fiance visa. I just hope they're not from the Philippines, because we're doing some K1s from the Philippines right now, and the embassy, the U.S. embassy in Manila has been shut down for a long time, and they're just waiting for years. And I think there's a lawsuit that someone filed about this some months ago out in Washington, D.C. We'll have to see how it goes. But you can file a K1 visa, which is a fiance visa, and you have to show to the U.S. government in the process, you know, the Department of Homeland Security, the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service, that you know, that you're genuinely a couple, that you intend to get married, and you show, you know, proof that you have a relationship and that kind of thing. And you fill out the, you know, complete the requisite government forms and that kind of thing. And you could do that. If you would like to get married first, well, I mean, you ask if he can come here, or if you should go there. Does he have a lawful way of coming to the US? If he comes to the US, let's say in some kind of non-immigrant category, like a visitor, you're in a little bit of a pickle, because he's doing that. And as I had mentioned earlier, by getting that visa, that non-immigrant visa, he's making a representation to a US government official, a consular official, that he doesn't have immigrant intent. So I guess he could come in, you could get married, and he could adjust his status to that of legal permanent residence. There's a case from, I want to say it's at 1982. It's an old case, I guess 40 years old now, called Matter of Cavazos. Doesn't matter, I'm just saying it out loud, but I think that case says that even if you have preconceived intent, that's not enough to prevent you from getting your adjustment of status. So at the end of the day, he'd be okay. I don't know. I don't like advising clients to do things like that. Just do it 100% right, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, and Charles could disagree with me on that, which I would certainly respect. But go there, get married if you want to do it that way. And then when you do that, then you can file an I-130, which is that alien relative petition we talked about just a few moments ago with the other question, as long as you're going to maintain a US residence. I mean, these things get complicated. You see, there's all these little pieces that have to fit, you know, and so, but that's the general idea. I hope that answered the question. I mean, I think it answered it pretty well, but I mean, maybe there's a couple of little tiny details I missed, just because sometimes we sit down for an hour and do consultations with people about this exact type of stuff, you know, because there's so many little things, but that's the general idea.
Someone typed into the chat, I think another way to immigrate into the US is through the Visa Green Card Lottery, not open to all countries. Do you guys want to elaborate on that, about the lottery?
I'll say this. I think there's a reason why none of us bothered to mention that, because while it exists, just like that word lottery implies, it is such a long shot. If you're on a country, from a country where you can qualify, there's no downside. You should go ahead and timely apply, but you cannot rely upon it. You wouldn't want to rely upon your financial well-being by, buying a lotto ticket and think that's going to be your retirement account, because very, very few percentage-wise, there's only be a few people that win have a winning ticket that they buy, and same thing here. Very few people will, and so you simply cannot do that. I've had clients apply for the lottery every year for years, and someone's got to. They never won, but someone's got to, and so you might as well. But if you truly want to immigrate, then you've got to look at the options that are viable through probably will be family or employment in the vast majority of the cases.
Another question here. Can any U.S. visitor, a non-resident living out of the U.S., obtain a Social Security number to fulfill a requirement for admin purposes or in connection with some inheritance?
If I understood the question, they're a non-immigrant living outside of the United States, and they need a Social Security number. No, they have to get a Social Security number. You have to have status, that is a work authorized status in the United States, a citizen or a permanent resident or a non-immigrant that has a work authorized status. Now, sometimes you can satisfy that need by applying and obtaining a taxpayer ID number. I don't know what their need is, but if I understood your question, they would not be able to obtain a social security number.
Ms.
I'll just-
Diana,
Can I just throw in, Nia, that sounds like that individual may need the services of sort of it's kind of rare, but I actually know someone I'm not trying to promote that person, but just because I happen to have a good colleague and friend who does that kind of work, they do international probate work. So they probably want to talk to a professional who does that. So somebody dies in the United States, but they have family in Greece and, land in Australia, or I'm just throwing stuff out there. That's very complex stuff. And there are attorneys who specialize in that kind of thing. So I don't think I think Charles is 100% right. I don't think the idea of, they're probably not going to be able to get a social security number anyway, because that's tied to employment in the US, but I'm not sure they have to have one. I mean, that's outside my realm. I don't do international probate, but that's probably what they want to do, is find someone who does that.
okay. That was the only other question that was here in the chat, but I actually did have a question too. A lot of the stuff you guys were even mentioning was like way over my head. So for somebody that's looking to even start the process, that has no clue as to what these forms are, where do you go, how do they protect themselves from getting scammed or duped by somebody that can promise them to do all of this stuff for them and end up, losing pretty much everything to get it done because they're in such a need? What do they need to look out for?
This is an issue I've been involved with from a policy point of view. We have sort of in a situation where the person that is the neediest, the people with the most need, in fact, have the fewest options. So I talk to people all the time, and they want to know what the cost is going to be. And I sort of joke, and I say, the good news will be if I can charge you a big legal fee, because that means there's something I can do for you. Because so many people will not have a valid legal option. And so therefore there are people that will provide what I call immigration magic. Particularly in the Hispanic community, notario público. So a notary public, and that translates into Spanish notario público. So in civil law countries, a notary public is someone that is not only a lawyer, but has been appointed by a governor or head of state that is essential for critical legal transactions. So when someone comes from Latin America and sees the words notario público, immigration services, they, in their mind, they may think they're seeing someone better than a lawyer, someone that has a special appointment by the governor. In fact, if you're a notary public, anyone can be a notary public. You get a certificate from the state of Texas. So what I have seen is there's a tremendous amount of exploitation, because when someone goes to that person, the truth is there's nothing to be done. They may, for example, because they're here in unauthorized status, that may be the end of it. They're subject to a 10-year bar. And I know no one's going to go back and wait in 10 years. But that person isn't going to make any money unless they can sell them something. And they may say, well, we'll file this. For example, what we're talking about, this fourth preference petition for a sibling, and you can go get your visa. But they don't mention that it could take 20 or 25 years. And if you did go, you'd have to wait 10 years out of the country. And they'll charge them a big legal fee for essentially doing nothing. So I think what to do, go to a lawyer. There are good immigration lawyers. Go to one with experience. And one way you can tell they have that experience, are they board certified by the State Bar of Texas? To me, if there's one thing that where you could sort of just, if you wanted some objective standard, that would be it. or you're board certified by the State Bar of Texas by the Board of Legal Specialization. Just like when you went to a doctor, you don't go to see a doctor, you go to an orthopedic, you go to you go to a specialist, someone that is certified in their field of medicine.
If I could address that as well, I think I really appreciate all the comments Charles just made. You know, I was on a committee for about a year. You know, as lawyers, we have the option sometimes to serve on different types of committees, and I was on the Unauthorized Practice of Law Committee here in Houston and Harris County. And so that addresses what you were sort of talking about there, Nia, which is there are people out there basically doing the unauthorized practice of law, which is illegal. You know, you can't, you know, like Charles said, yes, in other countries, maybe a notario público is somebody who's appointed by the government and is a lot more qualified. Here, you pay your $100 fee, you get a stamp in a book, and now you're a notary public. And so people don't realize that. So they go there and then they fill out forms, just what I said at the very beginning. A lot of people say, oh, it's just filling out forms. How hard could this be, right? Just like you're filling out a questionnaire at a shopping center. And next thing you know, I'm sure Charles and AB have seen far more cases than I have, since they're such a much larger firm and been doing it for so much longer. But I mean, we have plenty of people who come to us whose cases were completely botched by these notarios, and they didn't know any better. And you kind of want to, you know, hit your head and say, how could you possibly have gone to these people? But they don't know. These people are committing fraud. And, you know, and on that committee, we were, you know, tasked with the job of finding these people and finding ways to have them, you know, pay penalties and whatnot. And unfortunately, you know, everybody deserves due process, and within that, which is always a good thing, but it just took a long time. And it was sort of I didn't feel like we were making as much of a difference as we could, because those people were still out there for a long time, you know, harming people. But the point being that the State Bar of Texas has resources, Nia, and I know that USCIS as well, when you go to their offices, sometimes they have brochures and pamphlets as to how to protect yourself from notarial fraud, essentially. So that's something people can take a look at. And Charles is 100% right. I mean, I know that a lot of these people who come to us often are not, don't have a lot of education or background or whatever, but if they could at least, at the very least, make sure this person's a licensed attorney, that would be helpful, because this is the practice of law. You cannot be doing this unless you're a lawyer. Or overseen by a lawyer, you know, if you're a paralegal in a law firm or something like that. And the second thing is board certification is really important. And I'll just say a quick word about that. I know Charles has been board certified far longer than I have, but I got board certified about 8 years ago. And it's a pretty high standard. I mean, you know, I think it's a tiny percentage, maybe 2 or 3% or 5% of lawyers in the entire state of Texas who are board certified in their areas. I think in immigration is probably even smaller. Last I checked, it was about 170 immigration lawyers who are board certified in the whole state of Texas, and there's probably many thousands of immigration lawyers. So you can just do the math. It's a very, you know, selective situation. You have to pre-qualify just to even be able to take an exam. And by pre-qualifying, that means you have to show that you have extensive experience in every major area in immigration law. You've got employment, you've done investment, you've done naturalizations, you know, you've done green cards in all types of forms. You've done non-immigrant visas, you've done work in immigration court, et cetera, et cetera. And then once you pre-qualify, then you go to Austin. At least I did. I don't know when it was in your day, Charles, but we went to Austin and sat all day for an all-day exam. It's like a bar, except instead of 2.5 days, it's a 1-day bar just on immigration. And not that many people pass it. And so, you know, that's a good way to look to see who has those qualifications. Just at the end of the day, just like Charles mentioned, the medical analogy, if you're getting heart surgery, this is a big deal. I mean, you want to go to somebody who's really pretty good and got plenty of experience and been, you know, vetted by the highest, you know, kind of standards in the state. So those are helpful. And I see some comments here, and I know that a lot of people really didn't ever think they needed a lawyer for this stuff. And the last comment I'll say is I use lawyers, you know. I went to, you know, Charles is far senior to me, but you know, I went to law school, graduated 20 years ago. I've been practicing law for 20 years. I still hire lawyers for things for me. I hired a wills and probate estate lawyer for our family. I hired a lawyer to help me with the real estate transactions at my office and at my house. You know, I hire a lawyer to go do my traffic tickets. Yes, I've had a traffic ticket before. These people, yes, I'm a lawyer and I went to 3 years of law school and I've been practicing, but I'm very specialized in what I do. And these people are specialized. I can't use the word specialized. In Texas, you can't say somebody's a specialist unless they're board certified, but they're focused in their area. So this traffic ticket guy, he does that all day, every day. I'd better, you know, go to him. You know, this real estate lawyer does that all the time. So, I mean, even us lawyers use lawyers because we know the value of someone who has that level of skill, experience, background, and training. You know, we're not just throwing money out the window for fun. And I would tell you, or something like immigration, and Charles could say a lot more probably, but everything I've seen in my 15 years of doing this, I mean, I think you'd be foolish not to use a lawyer. Just make sure you do it right. I've seen highly intelligent people in other areas. I had an architect from Germany once. They thought they would do it themselves and they botched it. And next thing you know, they put their whole case back years and years and years. It's really difficult. And especially now in the pro-Trump era where everything is incredibly backlogged, why risk it? I don't know. That's, I might be a tad biased, but that's certainly how I see it.
And let me ask you a question. What's the cost range to hire an attorney for immigration?
Oh gosh, that's all over the board. Charles, maybe.
Yeah, it's almost impossible to say, what does it cost to buy a house or car or a meal? You have to start to say, well, where so many conditions. So I would say this, having been in the field of law for a long time, I think overwhelmingly the costs that are provided by immigration practitioners across the board are very, very reasonable. If you read the Houston Chronicle about some of the big firms just 2 days ago, the average billing rate for partners is $1,700 an hour. For their junior associates, $1,000 an hour. Meaning if you work for a couple of hours talking with about the case, that's $2,000 or $3,000. I think across the board, people get a real bargain because all immigration lawyers, I sort of know what people are charging. They may charge a little bit less or a little bit more, but I find most legal fees fairly reasonable. Number one. Number two, my point earlier, if I've got a client and I can tell them I can charge a legal fee, that's a wonderful thing, because I tell a lot of people, I'm not going to charge you a fee because you've got nothing. There is no basis for you to qualify now unless you have a number of friends, like a majority in the House and the Senate and the president, that can change the law. So that's a good thing, but get a reputable attorney. I think immigration fees on cases on the high side would be, depending upon what it is, employment-based non-immigrants qualifying for permanent residency. On the high side would be $10,000. It could be less than that. It could be more than that. But in the area of real estate, business, corporation, $10,000 could be an afternoon conference. One afternoon, we went there for 3 or 4 hours and we talked about that. Here's your bill for that. So overwhelmingly, legal fees are reasonable. Find an experienced attorney, hopefully board certified. And the good news is that they can charge you that legal fee. That means they can do something.
Now, for folks that they don't want to go through an attorney or can't afford to go through an attorney, what are some of the most common things that you see folks doing wrong when it comes to filling out these documents and these forms?
I just think, number one, if they cannot afford an attorney, there are limited pro bono services. Catholic Charities, all 3 of the law schools have immigration clinics. But the truth is they can't afford a consultation fee. That same person is going to go out and buy a TV or something, and this is the most important decision. I tell people all the time that consultation is the most important thing you can get, because you can learn you can learn if there's anything to do, so that you're just not spinning your wheels or doing something that puts you. I've had people represent themselves who've actually wound up surrendering themselves at the end of their work. They have wound up in a deportation proceedings without realizing what they did. They surrendered themselves to the Immigration Service. So if they could, I would say, if they're representing themselves, that's a huge mistake. They should not do that. Just like I shouldn't treat myself medically for anything that's serious, and that they should at least afford a consultation or go to one of the pro bono reputable agencies And I can think again of Catholic Charities, the law schools, maybe there are others that I'm sure as well.
And Nia, I'll get a list of also organizations like the City of Houston, as well as Catholic Charities that do have pro bono attorneys that will assist them with that process. So I'll get that for you and give me a couple of days and I'll get it for you.
Okay.
And I want to just echo something Charles said. Sorry, Nia, I just wanted to say, I mean, there's other organizations too, like the YMCA, there's neighborhood centers. And I just want to say, since Charles touched on this, I just have to say, thank goodness there are women in my office because I couldn't notice to save my life. But you know, you have people coming in telling you this sob story about how they can't afford anything, and then they've got this gold-plated the latest iPhone, and they're wearing these $1,000 Prada shoes. Now, I wouldn't notice the purse or the shoes, but I have women in my office say, "Did you see that purse she had? That's a $1,500 purse." I'm like, seriously? Because I mean, I just don't notice stuff like that. But you know, you find a way to pay for what's valuable. Do you need heart surgery?
Right.
Figure it out, you know, whatever. Do you need a way to have a way to stay in the country? You know, people do, Charles mentioned, there are 11 million people here, let's say undocumented, if that's whatever the number we want to use. Most of these people have jobs, and a lot of them are in family situations where they pool together. And at the very least, I think Charles is 1,000% right. Get a consultation, figure out where you stand. You know, I mean, I love what Charles said. I mean, the same people are going to go out and drive fancy cars and get the latest iPhone and get the latest, you know, clothes and purses and shoes and whatever, but then they make a big deal about, you know, so it's, and I don't mean to sound unsympathetic, but for something this important in your life, I find it fascinating that people suddenly can't afford it. I'm not trying to sound unsympathetic. I know that there are a lot of people, a lot of financial, you know, challenges, but at least, as Charles said, get a consultation. You've got to know where you stand from somebody who's done this for many years, preferably, like Charles said, board certified, and just know you're getting good advice, you know?
And you know, I love what you're saying, because I myself, and I agree. I mean, when I needed a knee replacement, I didn't go to someone that's going to fix my wrist, you know, replace my wrist or fix my wrist. I went to someone that I knew and researched that had conducted a lot of knee replacements. So I agree with you 100%, but there's a lot of our community leaders that can't afford it. And so in that form, we do have organizations that can assist them with that process. And, you know, we at the Month of Service would like to also offer that process to them. And they, if, you know, there's a process of assessment. If you can afford it, you know, how much do you make? And if you make so much, then I'm sure a lot of these organizations say, well, no, you would have to hire an attorney, just like we do with the will assessments. You know, there's organizations that will assist you with the free will, but you have to be in accordance with a certain amount of, you know, how much money you make. So we'll work on both sides, Nia, and then we'll get back. But I love what you guys are saying, because just to get informed, you need to get assessed. You need to go in and have an initial discussion with an attorney. Love it. Thank you so much.
There's another question. There's another question here in the chat. It says, is there a category for sponsoring a relative like a niece or a nephew for a citizen who has no direct family here?
No.
No. Oh, Diana? Simple.
I mean, unless the person wanted to adopt their niece or nephew, and they do it before the niece or nephew turns 16, but even then, I mean, I don't think the Department of Homeland Security is thrilled about that kind of stuff.
And they would have to be here physically,
Right.
because you have to show that you've lived with them in some sort of custodial relationship for 2 years as well.
Yeah, there's 2 years of physical custody, 2 years of legal custody. I mean, there's a lot of things.
Hello, you turned your camera on. So were there any particular questions? I know we answered the one question for you, but were there any other questions that you all had?
Well, first off, hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm with my dad and Jose,
Hola.
and I'm just kind of asking him like, hey, what are your questions? And essentially, the question right now is like, he's very much willing. He's retired. He's 75, like willing to, start the process and invest to have a lawyer do this. I think the main question he had right now was finding, just like I'm putting in like Texas board certified and through Google, and it's just like a lot of ads.
Just
and
go
I'm
to
just-
Charles. Don't worry about it. Go to Charles. He's sitting right there. He's the senior immigration practitioner in our state. Go to Charles. You don't Google anything.
Do you have the information? Do you have
Charles?
access to the chat that where I put in the contact information?
I don't, but I can find him right there. Also, thank you. I missed the first part and I came in late. But thank you. We're gonna start this process.
We'll send you the recording.
Yes, the session is being
Okay.
recorded, so we will send out the link to everybody that registered to participate, so they can go back and watch it again, or to view it with other family members or what have you as well.
And also you can go to Facebook, Amos Houston on Facebook, and all our
Yes.
virtual workshops are recorded, so you can watch them there. And you can pass them along, share them, because a lot of our community, a lot of us, we work 8 to 5, and a lot of our community members, when they get off around 8 o'clock or 9, they're sitting down, then you have time to watch our virtual workshops. That's why we put it on Facebook. We also put a lot of our virtual workshops on Instagram. And so we're working on a process with TikTok. So, Mr. Foster and Mr. Anuj, you guys, may want to help us with some TikToks, informational. Thank you.
And the last thing, first off, yes, TikToks are great. Second, just for like question for myself was, if I don't know this sibling that my dad had and later on recognized, and now he's trying to bring this sibling of mine over. What happens if my dad isn't here to like continue the process after we've already started? Like, I'm guessing it would be revoked.
Are you talking about your father petitioning for your sibling?
Correct, for his son, who I'm not familiar with, and I'm just like helping him out.
Is your father a citizen of the United States?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay. And how old is your sibling?
he's 34.
And where is he from?
Honduras.
Okay, so first of all, your father can petition for him. Is he married or single?
Single.
Yeah. Divorce.
My dad is divorced, but
No,
the guy is single, no kids.
his son.
Yeah, single, no kids.
No.
Okay, I can check. There's a certain, first of all, your father can petition for him. There's no doubt about it. It's a straightforward process. And his son is living in Honduras, right?
Yes.
So you go through a process. It will take several years, and he will be ultimately scheduled for his final interview at the American Embassy in Tegucigalpa. And I think your other question is, should your father along the way pass away?
Yes.
It used to be that the petition was automatically canceled, but can be it can be revalidated. But I think now it's automatically revalidated. Do you know Anuj or AB?
Yeah, I saw something about that they're changing that. So they're making it less cumbersome in case the petitioning party passes away.
Yeah, there's right now is 204L. It becomes valid only if the beneficiary, which in your case would be your stepbrother, were living in the United States. So if your father passes away, but he's living in the United States, then he may be able to keep the petition, but if he never came to the United States and it's outside, it wouldn't be reinstated.
Okay.
Mr. Halil, we'll make sure that you get Mr. Foster's contact information for you guys to reach out to them directly for more detailed
Thank you.
assistance. So, and I know Anush, you got to get ready to go in just a minute, so I don't want us to run out of time too much. Mr. Patel, you had a question? Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Yes, ma'am. And this is my first time joining. I really want to appreciate all the attorneys, their time to giving the time to educate us, general public, and the immigration laws. I represent a Indian organization called SEWA, SEWA International. SEWA basically means providing service to humanity. I am a family services case manager, and we get several cases. You know, Mr. Shah probably knows there is a large number of Indian community here who have come on H-1 visas, working for the companies here in Houston. And sometimes, you know, the husbands pass away and the wives are left without an immigration status. And that really becomes a challenge when they have kids. So just generally, what would the wives be able to, what kind of a status are the wives able to get in those cases?
Charles, I'll defer to you. I think you probably have seen more of those than I have.
Okay, 2 points. One, like Anuj, I do a lot of work with the Indian community, and it is so successful. It's a victim of its own success that there are so many bright, qualified Indian nationals that have sought permanent residency that we have a unbelievable backlog. So they come on H-1B, they seek permanent residency, but there may be a 14, 15, 20, 30-year backlog under the second and third preferences. So unfortunately for everyone, that's the H-1B visa holder, his spouse, his children, it's a real problem because they have to stay in status for such a lengthy period of time if they're trying to stay here in the US, and they cannot obtain permanent residency in any reasonable period of time. Now, you mentioned a special situation where the H-1B visa holder passes away.
Yes.
And leaves the spouse and the children that would be in H-4 status, sort of up the, as they say in Texas, up the creek without a paddle, because only the principal can extend that H-1B status. You only get it for 6 years, but assuming that a labor certification and I-1 party petition was filed, they could extend that indefinitely. But the person that is extending that is the H-1B visa holder. And so I would say for the spouse and the children, they're in a very difficult situation. And I've seen that. We've often transferred the spouse into F1 student status. You have to take a minimum of 9 hours. The kids they can get F2 status just to keep them all in status. I jokingly mentioned that I'd help people in order to maintain their status. They wound up getting master's and PhD degrees because they had nothing else to do. But unless the wife can independently qualify, which would be as a person of extraordinary ability, or make today they could make de facto $800,000 loan and make an application to change status. That person cannot continue their H-4 status. They would have to switch to another non-immigrant status, or to apply for immigrant status such as EB-5.
Otherwise, they would have to return back to India then with the children. Are the children able to stay by any reason?
They could, as a practical matter, they may stay. I don't think anyone's going to run out and put them in deportation proceedings.
Oh.
The problem with the kids are they want to finish their schooling. They want to finish the semester they're in.
Mm-hmm.
And the best option would probably be for the mother to apply for F1 status at a junior college. That protects, let's say there are multiple kids, they all get to maintain their status.
Thank you for that information. Appreciate it.
The only thing I would add is I agree with everything Charles said, and that's something that we've tried too. The thing is, at a junior college, it's more affordable, but when people are on an F1, they're still paying international student rates. So depending on the situation, some people find it cost prohibitive. So what we've done a couple of times is have people change their status from H4 to B2, so they can have 6 months to wind up their affairs and leave. And you can extend that B2 maybe once for another 6 months, but at a certain point, you just have to leave. So unless, as Charles said, they can find a way to do an EB1, extraordinary, ability petition or something, or have an extra $1 million or $800,000 lying around. That's a tough situation coming up. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Even just listening to y'all talk about these forms, the E, B, A, and the B, and the I, please hire an attorney. That's all I can say. Please get an attorney to do a consult.
We agree.
To be a lot to even keep up with. That's a lot. So get an attorney.
Amen.
All right. Were there any other questions that anybody had? Again, I know Anush, you have to leave for your other meeting, but I wanted to make sure that we don't forget anybody or kind of gloss over anything. But I do want to take a moment to thank you guys for taking the time out of your busy schedules today. It seems like the conversation after tends to always go into a little bit more detailed discussion than the actual presentation itself. So thank you guys very much for making yourselves available to provide this information to the community. It is greatly appreciated and much needed.
You know what, Nia, I really appreciate Mr. Foster and Mr. Anuj and Ms. Hart, Ms. Aby. Guys, you have no idea how many of our community leaders need this information. And it's very hard for them to get the information, the correct information, like you said. So we have the professionals. We both want you all back and to give more information to the Houston, Harris County, and the Houston community. Our community leaders are in dire need of this information, and to at least to know, have specific questions and get the right answers from the professionals. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Happy to do it anytime. Pleasure
Well,
meeting with the Anuj and Aby.
Absolutely. Nia and Myra, y'all always do a lovely job of putting these together. Thank you both. And Charles and AB, what a pleasure to present alongside both of you. It's been a real pleasure, and I hope we can do it again.
Till the next time.
Okay, take care, everyone.
We certainly invite you guys to come back to join us for other future A Month of Service presentations. Again, this Thursday, we have our wills and estate planning or wills and advanced planning and why you actually need it. That presentation is coming up, so hope to see you guys there. In addition to that workshop, our August schedule is completely out, so we will be setting workshops that we've got coming up for this month for you. So thank you guys once again. We hope that you all continue to have a wonderful day. Was there another question? Oh, okay. I hope you have a wonderful remainder of your day.
Okay.
And I think
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Jalil. I was trying to
Sí.
figure out how to say it.
See you on Thursday.
Adios.
All right. See you guys Thursday.